Happy Monday.
Happy Monday, you guys.
It's Cyber Monday. It's also
Oh
Motivational
yeah,
Monday.
yeah.
It's also Mindful Monday. Oh, it's the Monday Rundown.
If
Woo!
you were still hungover from Thanksgiving, drop it in the comments right now. Let us
Put
know,
a
guys.
turkey in the comments. Put a turkey emoji in the comments.
If you took today off because of the shenanigans over the weekend, let us know in the comments below.
What were the good deals you got on Black Friday? I want to know. What were the
Yeah,
good deals that you got on Black Friday?
yeah.
I just want to know. All right. So we're really excited. If this is the first time that you're with us on a Monday Rundown, it's the place where Winston and I get to talk about all the things and topics that we don't normally get to talk about on air. And so we love to hear from other content creators and other thought leaders about the topics that come up. Keep sending us your topics. We love the topics.
Yes,
And today
guys.
is a great one too.
Let's jump into it. Today's topic is
Can we change? Can we manage?
yeah,
Can we manage our emotional triggers? And I can edit that later. So yes, can we manage our emotional triggers? I think the answer is yes. I think we can manage them. The number one way is honestly to become aware. So I talk a lot about this in my book. If you don't have the book, it's already in the description box. You can get it below. I slept with a married man. Am I still a good person? But I talk about the awareness bit.
yeah.
Being a huge part of it. Like being able to identify what your triggers are in the first place is huge. And then once you're able to identify them, then from there you can go to how do you then like essentially how do you tell your brain, how do you tell yourself that like one, you're okay, two, identify the lies that you keep telling yourself, and then change your actions. Essentially, it ultimately ends up just you would normally trigger means that you normally act in a certain way without even thinking because of a past experience. And so the idea is if you're aware of the trigger and the emotion that it tips off in your brain, then you can recognize the lies that you're telling yourself, and then you can go into a different action than you normally would. And I think that's, for me, and at least what I talk about in my book, that's one of the best ways to deal with the triggers.
No, I completely agree, and I love that. I'm in the. I love the way your book breaks it down as well, especially with just through the story that it shares. And I would agree with you. I think you can manage your emotional triggers. One is definitely about becoming aware, realizing if you're having certain experiences happening maybe over and over again, you are, you're probably the consistent denominator in all of those instances. So you probably play a huge role in that. And again, even what you said, Janelle, about your story and how your past, how you, I think how you frame your past definitely will influence your future. So we have to be mindful about maybe some of the stories we're continuing to tell ourselves about things that happened to us in our past, and having again, so just awareness around that. From there, you can then begin to implement different strategies to help get you out of certain situations. For me, I recognize when if I'm starting to respond to something emotionally in a way I don't like, the best thing for me sometimes is just to take a step away from it. That might be the best way in that instance. It's not maybe trying to make myself happy with an uncomfortable situation. It might just be best in that instance to step away from it to help regroup and change maybe the way I'm talking to myself in that moment, or so I don't interact or respond to someone negatively.
Yeah, that's a great way to manage it. Well, as you know, we love hearing from other thought leaders and content creators. Our new favorites are the School of Life.
Absolutely.
Love them. They've
Yeah, I
got
love that.
content. So let's hear what they've got to say about the triggers.
The concept of being triggered, though it may at times be overused, sits on top of a hugely important concept in psychological life, which demands our respect, compassion, and attention. To be triggered is, in its most basic form, to respond with intense fear and anger to a situation in the here and now, which to other people may seem blameless and unconcerning. One moment we are calm, the next we're catapulted into despair and terror. Only minutes ago, the future looked hopeful. Now, only ruin and disaster seem to lie ahead. Most of us who suffer from these episodes would very much like to better hold on to calm and hope. It may be important to know how to be scared or angry when situations actually demand it, but the triggered person typically feels after an episode. It's also deeply counterproductive and just plain exhausting to be visited by powerful emotions that aren't warranted by what lies before us and that fail to advance our interests in any way. The way out of being uncontrollably triggered is to understand how the mechanism operates. The mind is triggered when it believes that it recognizes in the world around it a situation that it feels, from memory, is going to be highly damaging and dangerous. Our triggers are a secret guide to our own private histories. They tell us about things that we were once very afraid of. The triggering element is like a piece of a jigsaw that will precisely fit into an analogous puzzle in the past. We are triggered now by what we were devastated by then. Even if we don't remember too much about our past, we can guess everything we need to know from reverse engineering our triggers. If we're constantly afraid we're going to be excommunicated and mocked, this will, in some form, be exactly what happened to us at some stage long ago. If we're terrified that someone is going to overpower us and not listen to our no's, this is an almost sure echo of what we once experienced. The precise relationship between trigger and catalytic event may not always be literally equivalent. There can be some displacement along the way, but the link will be strong all the same. The trigger contains and maps onto a traumatic event. Let's imagine a person who is triggered, that is, thrown into powerful despair and self-loathing by images on social media of blatantly attractive and popular people. No sooner have they seen these than they start to doubt and despise themselves, reflect on their inadequacies, and remember all the reasons why they are fated to be a failure and unloved. The trigger is not entirely nothing. There is something a little bit dispiriting about the beauty parade on certain sorts of social media. But the point at issue is the scale of the reaction that is generated. In seeking to account for it, we've got to look backwards. The person has been triggered because the contemporary event contains, in a garbled, disguised, and unconscious form, the essence of a profoundly traumatic dynamic in earlier life, which lies mostly unknown and unexplored, and thereby commands immense and unending power over the victim. Let's suppose that this person had a mother who favored their more ebullient younger sibling over them, and that their looks were part of what damned them to horrible neglect and emotional coldness. It doesn't, in the circumstances, take much to be returned back to this bleak place. We are animals who are primed to sniff out in the present the slightest sign of the dangers of the past. The tragedy of triggering is that it fails to notice the differences between then and now, between the awfulness we suffered long ago and the relative innocence of the modern moment. Insofar as bad things do happen nowadays, triggering also fails to account for the way in which we're no longer children, and are therefore able to respond to the threats that do come our way with a lot more creativity, strength, and calm than we possessed as 4 or 10-year-olds. Were things ever to get as bad as they once were, we have so many more options than we did, and therefore so many reasons to feel less agitated and vulnerable. To be triggered is to lose our powers of discrimination. In the heat of the moment, we can no longer distinguish between A and B. So frightening is A that everything between it and Q is at heart another A. We can't tell that someone is not telling us that we're guilty, that the situation isn't evidence of doom, that we're not being mocked, that our colleague isn't attacking us, that we aren't being reprimanded unbearably, that we haven't been told we're an idiot or a monster. We can't distinguish between looking a bit tired and looking fundamentally unacceptable, between something they've done that got them sent to prison and something that we've done that won't ever be noticed. So primed as our history made us to appalling scenarios, we have no ability not to re-find them at every turn, especially when we're a bit low or a bit tired. Though we might assume that we'd want to escape our triggers, we are also often drawn to them through a compulsive sense of familiarity. Calm and confidence aren't our resting places. They don't feel normal and are therefore worrying in their own way. We want our awful hunches confirmed. It can feel right to put ourselves in environments where people might be mocking, to look out for stories of disgrace or ruin, or to befriend people who are constantly on the edge of harming us. The cure for triggering is love. Love understood as a process of patiently holding someone and, like a kindly and soothing parent, helping them to discriminate between black and white, terror and calm, evil and goodness. The cure lies, too, in learning how to work backwards from our current triggers to understanding the dynamics that once created them. Rather than worrying yet again about the future, we should ask ourselves the simple question: what does my fear of what will happen tell me about what did happen? What scenario from my past is contained in my alarm at the future? To overcome our triggers is to come to navigate the present with all the confidence and excited curiosity that should have been ours from the start. And maturity could be defined as knowing what triggers us and why, and a commitment to dampening our first responses in the name of a patient exploration and understanding of our own histories.
Wow.
That was really good. Not only did they explain why triggers happen, the narrator also explained why we also look for environments and people who can then substantiate the things that
Affirm,
that
we think.
The confirmation bias is what we call it in science. Man, that is so good. And then, like, of course, how to solve it, which is love. Just like have love and compassion for the person who's being triggered in that moment, so that way they can like change it. You essentially change the dynamic. Once you receive a different response, it's like, oh, I was freaking out because I thought this was going to be the result of what just happened. But this person is showing me love and acceptance and compassion. That's not what I got in the past. So already you've like changed.
You're reshaping how it is. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
The other thing, I don't know if you guys caught it, but on one of the videos, they showed the person logging off of social media. And I, it made me think of what I said about walking away from some things at times. There's a woman I listen to, and she talks about the idea that we watch things that, to the point you made, Janelle, would actually trigger us. You're watching something that is triggering you, and instead of turning it off, there's this sense you want to like overcome this thing by like, I'm gonna keep this thing, I'm gonna make this thing submit to me, so I'm gonna keep throwing myself into these situations. And the healthier thing might be for you to stop watching it, turn that show off. There are tons of shows that deal with topics that I used to watch, and although I thought I liked it, it's the point that they made, I was actually continuously beating myself up, putting myself in this repetitive cycle of listening, seeing situations that made me very uncomfortable. And instead of deciding not to do that, I continued to, just out of repetition, keep watching these shows, reading these books, looking at these sites that are just not healthy for me.
It's making me realize something, what you're saying with social media and entertainment. Also in the book, I talk about like putting myself in a room with someone already having a triggered like thought, right? I'm unlovable. And then to your point, well, I could be in this room with this person and like overcome whatever the thought is.
Some endearing,
Yeah, and
but
obviously,
why?
Like, no, why? Yeah, why do that? Like, why put yourself through that? Yeah, totally agree. I love
the
that.
better thing ultimately. The thing she says is, you can never have a happy ending when you have an unhappy story, and many of us continue to put ourselves in unhappy situations, hoping like a hero to overcome it's like, but no, the easier or healthier or whatever term, the right thing to do is to not continue putting yourself in compromising situations.
Love that. Put it in the chat. Let us know. How do you feel about this? How did it resonate with you?
Jinx.
Oh. Hashtag resonate. We want to hear it. We want to see it. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next week. But until then, as always, remember, you deserve the good life. Say that.
We'll see you guys soon. Enjoy the week.